Benjamin Blandin, a French scholar and associate researcher at the Korea Institute for Maritime Strategy, raised a key point at a South China Sea conference. He revealed that while China claims to have 400 naval ships, only around 120 of them are truly capable of long-range operations, after accounting for maintenance and training. Blandin's statement highlights a critical gap in China's naval capabilities, exposing that the Chinese Navy cannot simultaneously maintain global presence, handle multiple conflicts, and remain combat-ready, despite official claims to the contrary. This discrepancy is becoming increasingly evident in the South China Sea. Scene 1. Why the 400-ship claim is misleading. In 2025, China's Navy reportedly has about 395 battle force ships, which is often rounded up to 400. This count includes aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, submarines, amphibious ships, minesweepers, and auxiliary vessels, but excludes smaller fast boats. While this sounds like a substantial number, the real question is how many of these ships are actually ready for immediate combat. If we consider that 1/3 of the fleet is operational, 1/3 is in training, and 1/3 undergoing maintenance, with additional losses from long-term repairs, technical failures, and deployment across different sea areas, around 120 ships are available for sustained use. Blandin's figure of 120 combat-ready ships is not an arbitrary guess, it's a reasonable and cautious estimate. Additionally, over half of China's naval vessels are coastal ships that cannot operate far from shore. The deeper issue lies in China's shipbuilding pace, which has outpaced the development of skilled personnel. Even China's own media acknowledges the imbalance between new ship technologies and the availability of trained personnel. The People's Liberation Army Daily has recognized that the rapid advancement of ship technology has led to a shortage of skilled workers, creating a structural problem. While the U.S. Navy has fewer ships, it can effectively operate on multiple fronts. This is because the U.S. Navy's total tonnage is about 4.6 million tons, while China's fleet is just over 2 million tons, highlighting a significant disparity. The tonnage of a navy directly impacts its missile capacity, range, and resistance to damage. Furthermore, the U.S. Navy's strength comes not only from its fleet size, but also its well-established professional corps, with officers and crew gaining decades of experience on the same ship classes. In contrast, the rapid expansion of China's Navy means that while new ships are launched, there aren't enough experienced personnel to handle them effectively, resulting in a mismatch between ship quantity and operational capability. In conclusion, while the U.S. Navy has fewer ships, its firepower and global deployment capabilities are unmatched. China may have a larger fleet, but its naval force is primarily limited to coastal defense, lacking the capability for sustained global operations. Scene 2. A coastal fortress does not equal a blue water navy. Where does the strength of the Chinese Navy lie? It is designed for operations close to home, relying heavily on shore-based support. This isn't a criticism, but rather a consequence of the path China has chosen, one it cannot easily surpass. Reports from the U.S. Congressional Research Service clearly state that the primary task of China's naval modernization is not about global dominance, but about controlling Taiwan, securing the first island chain, enforcing maritime law in the South China Sea, and pushing U.S. forces out of the Western Pacific. As a result, China's fleet is geared towards near-shore dominance, including frigates, light destroyers, conventional submarines, shore-based anti-ship missiles, anti-aircraft defense, Coast Guard vessels, and maritime militias. This strategy works as a fortress in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. If the U.S. Navy enters the region, China relies on land-based missiles and aircraft to pressure them, and should they attempt to retreat, China would use fast boats, submarines, and the Coast Guard to engage. However, this territorial strategy starts to falter when stretched to distant seas. Think about it, thousands of kilometers away, the supply lines become long, and China's unfamiliarity with the local environment in areas like the Indian Ocean, Red Sea, and Central Pacific becomes a major disadvantage. Without land-based support, China's naval edge diminishes. This is precisely why China's strategy involves building artificial islands in the South China Sea. These man-made islands have 3,000-meter runways, deep water ports, and missile sites. Their goal is to transform the South China Sea into an anti-access area denial network. While this strategy may be clever, it also reflects China's underlying insecurity, as it openly acknowledges its inability to dominate open seas with its fleet alone. The fixed targets of these islands have a major flaw. While they are thousands of kilometers from China, they're only hundreds of kilometers from Vietnam and the Philippines. In the event of a conflict, these artificial islands would become vulnerable, unable to move and becoming frontline targets. Of course, China's Navy is also practicing distant sea operations. In 2025, the frequency of training exercises involving 2 or 3 aircraft carriers increased significantly. The Fujian aircraft carrier was officially commissioned in November, marking the formation of a 3-carrier framework. However, the key question is, how long do these operations last? How many routes are they taking? And can they maintain resupply without losing momentum? On May 27, 2025, the Liaoning aircraft carrier passed through the first island chain into the Western Pacific. On June 7, 2025, the Shandong carrier did the same, and these 2 carriers conducted far-sea combat training and confrontation exercises. While these operations seem large in scale, the public report suggests that each mission lasts only about 2 to 3 weeks before returning to the South China Sea or East China Sea for resupply and maintenance. A detailed U.S. Naval Institute report stated that the Shandong carrier operated in the Philippine Sea for about 16 days before returning to the South China Sea in late June. This is a typical pattern: deploy, train for a while, and then return for resupply. Unlike the U.S. Navy, which can stay deployed for months at a time, China's naval operations remain limited in duration. In October and November 2024, China's Liaoning and Shandong aircraft carriers conducted their first dual-carrier exercises in the South China Sea and beyond the first island chain. In June 2025, Japan's Ministry of Defense publicly noted that the 2 carriers conducted their first joint operations in the Pacific, as reported by the Japan Times. However, it's important to note the difference between appearing simultaneously and long-term deployment. China has achieved multiple points of appearance, but it is not yet capable of sustained operations across multiple fronts. In April 2025, the Shandong aircraft carrier was spotted near the Philippines, but the supporting supply vessels in its group numbered only 2. Reuters questioned how long such a fleet could maintain operations away from base. Open source assessments are clear. A 903A supply ship can sustain a small, long-range naval task force for about 2 weeks before requiring resupply. Even a larger 901-class ship is considered to need replenishment after a few weeks. This means that China's Navy is naturally limited to short-range operations in the open sea. China's overseas logistics capabilities are limited, with only the Djibouti base being a fully established long-range supply point. While Cambodia's Ream base hosts Chinese facilities, its political disputes and the presence of ships from other countries makes it more of a halfway point than a reliable supply hub. On November 5, 2025, the Fujian aircraft carrier was officially commissioned, as confirmed by the Diplomat and Reuters. However, Reuters also noted that for the Fujian to become a fully operational part of a long-range naval task force, it would require at least another year of training and development, particularly in terms of its aircraft carrier-based air wing, early warning systems, fleet coordination, and replenishment training. This highlights a crucial point. The framework of 3 aircraft carriers may be in place, but the endurance systems needed for sustained operations across multiple fronts are still under development. In contrast, the U.S. Navy typically deploys aircraft carriers to the Western Pacific for 6 to 8 months at a time, relying on a global network of ports, allied bases, nuclear-powered ships, and an extensive resupply system. While China's Navy has made significant progress, its long-range training missions still typically last only 2 to 3 weeks due to logistical constraints. China is indeed working on improving its supply capabilities, with the production of 901 and 903A supply ships increasing, and their sizes and capabilities aligning more closely with aircraft carrier accompaniment. However, the reality remains that no matter how many supply ships China builds, it still faces the challenge of operating multiple long-range task forces simultaneously. These supply ships must support aircraft carriers, task groups, and return to port for replenishment, creating logistical bottlenecks. Consider the situation: one line focused on the South China Sea, another in the Western Pacific, and a third securing the Indian Ocean. Aircraft carriers just rotate, provide escort, and train. If the supply lines falter, these long-range operations can only be short-lived displays of power before returning home. Unlike the U.S. Navy, which can remain deployed for months at a time, China's carriers are still constrained by supply limitations. Scene 3. Vietnam's accelerated land reclamation. Even in the South China Sea, the Chinese Navy is not all-powerful. Vietnam has proven to be a formidable adversary, able to stand up to China in the region. Currently, Vietnam's land reclamation efforts in the South China Sea have reached 70% of China's efforts. If this pace continues, it may soon surpass China's reclamation activities. From November 2023 to the first half of 2024, Vietnam added approximately 280 hectares of artificial land to 10 of its outposts in the Spratly Islands. almost equivalent to the total reclamation done in the previous 2 years. Satellite tracking by AMTI CSIS has documented every new piece of land very clearly. So what has China done in response? Not much. China dares not confront Vietnam directly, though it continues to bully the Philippines. Why? Because Vietnam is a much tougher opponent. The country's political and military system is resilient, and its society holds deep distrust towards Beijing. The memories of the 1979 border war and the 1988 Johnson South Reef incident are still fresh, and any Chinese aggression only reinforces Vietnam's resolve. In July 2019, a standoff occurred at Vanguard Bank, where China's Haiyang Dizhi-8 survey vessel and its fleet were pressing on Vietnam's oil and gas areas, forcing Vietnam's projects to halt. The confrontation dragged on for months. In response, Vietnam immediately began its own land reclamation, showing no hesitation. While Vietnam has not militarized its reclaimed islands as China has, these islands are strategically close to its mainland. With shore-based anti-ship missiles, air defense, and coastal airports, Vietnam can effectively monitor the South China Sea. Mobile radars further extend their surveillance. The Chinese military must be cautious whenever it approaches these areas. Vietnam has also expanded its naval capabilities, building submarines, fast boats, Coast Guard vessels, and civilian ships. While these may not be highly advanced, they serve as a constant presence, wearing down China's navy with daily patrols and keeping them on edge. This persistent presence has the potential to frustrate China's ambitions in the region. Scene 4. Why China is low-key with Vietnam but bullies the Philippines. China focuses its pressure on the Philippines because its fleet and firepower are insufficient, forcing it to pick on a weaker opponent. Unlike Vietnam, which operates under a centralized political system, the Philippines is a democracy, and its political spectrum can shift dramatically with each election. The Philippines also struggles with a weaker Coast Guard and Navy, limited main ships, and outdated surveillance systems. The CSIS 2025 assessment points out that the Philippine Coast Guard only has about 20 major vessels, and its surveillance coverage is limited due to aging platforms. China has calculated that pressuring Vietnam could lead to undesirable consequences, but pressuring the Philippines often yields results. The repeated water cannon attacks, collisions, and drag operations near Ren Ai Reef and Scarborough Shoal are examples of China picking on the easier target. Take Vietnam's land reclamation activities. During the pandemic years, Vietnam reclaimed land on multiple islands. If the Philippines had been seeking compensation, China would have acted much earlier, but it remained silent in the face of Vietnam's reclamation. This shows that Beijing cannot easily push Vietnam around. Look at how Vietnam is strengthening its network of alliances. On April 22, 2024, the Bali Katan exercise began, involving 16,000 personnel with a focus on the Palawan, Luzon Strait, and South China Sea areas. The U.S. military called it the largest all-domain joint operation exercise. On August 9, 2024, Vietnam and the Philippines conducted their first joint Coast Guard exercise, simulating firefighting, search and rescue, and water cannon confrontations. While these activities are officially presented as humanitarian, they also reinforce mutual support. In December 2024, Japan upgraded its security aid to the Philippines, providing equipment like coastal radars and small patrol boats, while also helping build large patrol vessels for the Philippine Coast Guard. From June to July 2025, the U.S. continued strengthening Vietnam's maritime capabilities by transferring a third high-endurance patrol vessel and offering additional training and patrol support. In October 2025, the U.S. and the Philippines established a new joint military task force aimed at responding quickly in the South China Sea, Luzon, and the Taiwan Strait. Every few months, these nations continue to reinforce their positions. America tightens the net, Japan fills the gaps, Australia provides peripheral support, and Vietnam and the Philippines hold the front lines. This growing network is laying the groundwork for a coordinated defense. Despite China's efforts in the South China Sea, it has not achieved dominance. While it has artificial islands, the logistical challenges of maintaining a presence in such a vast area are clear. There are 1,500 kilometers in range, requiring 3,000 kilometers of travel. The main reason China doesn't confront Vietnam directly is that the Philippines is too weak to resist. Against stronger nations, China hesitates. The conclusion is clear. China's fleet is overstretched and weak, while Vietnam has become a strong player in the South China Sea. With only about 120 ships capable of sustained operations, China simply cannot control the entire region. Conclusion. When it comes to China's Navy, it's not about how many ships it has or how perfectly aligned they appear at a military parade. The real question is how many ships can stay operational for the long term, how many can fight on multiple fronts, and how many can sustain continuous operations with proper resupply. History has shown us two examples of grow too big then run out of steam. After Japan's Meiji Restoration, the Navy expanded rapidly. They won the First Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War. They felt invincible. But when World War II broke out, Japan's industrial base and manpower couldn't keep up with rapid expansion. The larger the fleet, the more it became a drain on national resources. The Soviet Union faced a similar situation during the Cold War. It had a massive fleet, but the cost of maintenance, training, and long-range supply was like a snowball rolling down a hill. In the end, the Soviet fleet collapsed, not from external defeat, but because it exhausted its own resources. China's Navy faces a similar dilemma today, summed up in three cold facts: maintaining a global presence, handling multiple conflicts at once, and ensuring readiness for combat at any time. When you break down China's fleet of 400 ships, only about 120 of them are capable of long-term operations. So what wars can they really fight? The core issue with the Communist Party's naval fleet is that no matter how many ships they build, it won't solve the problem. There simply aren't enough skilled personnel to operate them. There also aren't enough supply ships to keep them fueled and supplied. And even if China builds more supply ships, sustaining a fleet in far-flung waters will remain an impossibility. The Navy still needs time to develop. As we've seen in the South China Sea, China's Navy is already cautious with countries like Vietnam, which is right on its doorstep. In the event of a real war, the surrounding nations, along with the US, Japan, and other free societies, will be watching closely, waiting for China's Navy to buckle under pressure.